Hello, we'll talk now about a very important Danish architect, Henning Larsen, born in 1925 and died in 2013. But the architectural firm that he founded continues to this day and is the largest architecture firm in Denmark. Let's see what we can learn from these architects. He was a Danish architect, and he is internationally known for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs built in Riyadh and the Copenhagen Opera House, of course, in Copenhagen. Larsen studied at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts, from which he graduated in 1952. He continued studies subsequently at the Architectural Association School of Architecture in London and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the United States. His mentors included Arne Jacobsen and Jonah Utzon, the two architects that I took the pleasure and the responsibility to present to you, because they are indeed seminal names and architectural figures in Denmark and worldwide. In fact, about Arne Jacobsen, we'll talk after we talk about Mr. Larsen. This was the man, a Dane, and the Danish culture has indeed remarkable architects and designers, so many of them today as well. So Henning Larsen, Henning Larsen, Henning Larsen, Henning Larsen, and drawings, some drawings by him. The specificity of the Danish design is the clarity of the design, the stylistic element which distinguishes the Danish design from other fields of design from various countries and cultures is a very sensitive manipulation of geometry. They use simple geometry often, but there is a certain sensitivity here which marries the spirit, l'esprit de géométrie with l'esprit de finesse, to use the words of Boileau, the spirit of geometry and the spirit of fineness. What is also interesting is that Søren Kierkegaard, the great Danish philosopher, complained that the Danish society cultivates some kind of a leveling of all people in the name of democracy, and it's very hard. That's what he thought at his time. It was very hard for strong personal idiosyncratic minds or talents to manifest themselves outside of the leveling that I mentioned. But what happens today, there are, at least in architecture, and I imagine not only in architecture, there is a different Denmark. A Denmark which cultivates a difference, cultivates even risky gestures in architecture. And so there is even a flamboyance, the unexpected flamboyance from this reticent high quality culture. And perhaps it's also worth reflecting on the fact that Hamlet was a Danish prince, meaning the Prince of Doubts, at least in the vision of William Shakespeare. Anyway, the drawings of Henning Larsen are not, they don't have the poetical lyricism of Alvaro Siza. They don't have the incisivity of the drawings of Le Corbusier. They are, moderate drawings, if I am to call them so. But the architecture that he built and envisioned is a good architecture. Maybe it's not always very, very exciting, but let's see. 1968, the campus center in Dragvoll at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, Trondheim. Yes, this is a clear-cut modernism with still a lot of glass in some parts. At that time there wasn't a concern with the loss of energy, but the idea to have this street, interior street, is a good idea because on it people meet, discuss, make friendships, have debates and whatever. So it's like a long, uh, rather narrow social living room for res publica. And such spaces, interstitial spaces, are very, very important because they are transitional spaces, the space in between. And in the space in between, things happen, interaction happens. So interaction is very, very important in architecture. There where res privata meets res publica, as maybe Leon Krier would have said. As for the glass, yes, the mythology of glass continues its glorious journey towards our imagination and eyes. 1979, the Danish embassy in Riyadh. Now look here, again, the Danes are extremely good at erasing the idea that the detail in architecture is something insignificant. The detail is part of the whole, and it's conceived with the same seriousness and the same sensitivity like the whole scheme or the whole building. And it's a particularity of the Danish design to do a lot with less. But this is not minimalism, really. I mean, even the picture we look at, this is not a minimalist architecture. It employs simple elements, but there is a certain lyricism here, certain feelings, a certain atmosphere which go beyond the limitations of a strictly understood minimalism. And there is also the reference to the context, of course, is the Arab world. I mean, even if it's a Danish embassy, it's the Arab world. And this sensitivity to context is to be appreciated, I think. Now, commercial college and residences in Frederiksberg, 1982-1987. Again, Henning Larsen. The children seem to enjoy it. The windows seem to enjoy themselves being part of this building because, as you see, they are placed, rather freely and of various sizes. And this was done before, let's say, Kazuyo Sejima did similar things, or many other architects. So there is a sense of playfulness, and it is good that there is playfulness, because you cannot just have, moralistic or morose, seriousness without a feeling of playfulness. Playfulness is important in creativity, and is so in life as well. So, the buildings are not, exceptional in the sense of standing out with remarkable aesthetics. But personally, I would have loved to live in one of these apartments and enjoy looking at these children who enjoy themselves in the playing areas of the complex. He could have made all the windows aligned. He could have made all the windows the same size. Why didn't he? Well, because again, I think he understood, and I think it would be best if we all understand play is part of life, and even capriciousness. Why not also be capricious, at least sometimes? Why do you have to justify everything logically and in a Cartesian way? Why can't we just break the box here and there, at least sometimes? The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Riyadh, 1982-1984, a fortress, but the fortress is broken by light, in this case, artificial and natural, or should I say not natural and artificial, because truly the solar rays, the rays of natural light mean a lot through their diagonals and their inspiring ascending and descending force. A fortress, yes. A fortress, a culture where maybe the opaque wall is justified not only in terms of culture, but also in terms of uh, ecology. Now a library, 1984, 1985. It looks almost banal, but looked at more carefully, maybe it's not so banal. And here we see, um, an appeal to those who look at this picture to also act upon the words they learn. So not only in words, but also in actions. And by the way of this, I reflected a little bit on the fact that in our country, students do not protest. And I think they have many reasons to protest, and yet they don't do it. In other words, they do not act. At one time, probably this will change. But for the moment, there is a lot of timidity. So, a library by Henning Larsen, uh, luminous, decent, clean. The Muller Center for Continuing Education in Cambridge, in Great Britain, 1992. He was affected by postmodernism, and you can see here, some shadows or echoes uh, arriving at his work from postmodernism. Uh, this is not necessarily a good thing, but he was not the only one who was marked, even temporarily, by what we call postmodernism. And the illusion that we can flirt with the past, uh, even if in a rather shallow way. What is not shallow here is the appearance of the octagon, eight-sided polygon, which deserves attention, and it has a lot of interest in the history of architecture and symbolism. And Leonardo da Vinci used the octagon frequently in his sketches, unbuilt works. I don't know why Larsen made that tower with an octagon shaped plan, but anyway, an extension of new Nye Carlsberg Glyptotek in Denmark, 1997, built, in conjunction with an existing building, but his intervention is resolutely modern. Henning Larsen, again, employing glass in maybe too generous ways. But at that time, again, we see a statue by Auguste Rodin there at the end of the corridor. Now, what is this? 1995 low energy office building in Denmark. Well, from what we look at here, it's hard to say if it's low energy or high energy, but we trust him and we trust them, his office. Uh, Again, the Danes do exceptionally high quality work with the simplest means, even if sometimes aesthetically they are not revolutionaries. Now, an extension of Malmö City Library, 1994-1999, another library built across the water from Copenhagen in Sweden, in Malmö. Probably the building, the books are not very happy with so much glass because natural light does affect paper, but maybe high quality, expensive glass is used that arrests the, you know, the dangerous rays of light to arrive at the paper. There are echoes here from Arne Jacobsen, and we are going to talk about Arne Jacobsen, a truly very important functionalist and international style Danish architect. Head office of Nordea in Copenhagen, 1999. He was in good measure some kind of a corporate architect. He built quality buildings for you know, large institutions, for corporations, and so on. I mean, not by accident, his architectural firm, after he died, and maybe even during his lifetime, was and is the largest architecture firm in Denmark. The word largest in the field of architecture or art doesn't necessarily mean, you know, the best or you know, the highest quality. It's just that the largest architectural firm, but there must be also a certain level of quality to arrive at the ability to you know, to sustain such a large office. In a certain way, after he died, his office began to do works more adventurously. Some of them. Henning Larsen. It is very interesting, and I'm not sure I'm right, but perhaps not so much in relation with Henning Larsen, but studying a little bit Danish architecture, contemporary Danish architecture, I thought of creating some kind of an institution called the Institute of Rural Urbanity or Rural Urbanism. I know it's an oxymoron. What do you mean, a rural urbanism? It's a contradiction in terms. But Denmark has a strong rural culture, and at the same time, it assumes levels of the corporate urban culture very high. And somehow some negotiation between the rural and the urban might be possible. And this intrigues me because I think and I hope that somehow the village will rescue the city. In what way? Well, we need nature, we need the oxygen, we need the ozone. So we cannot play games any longer with polluting the earth. So in that sense, the village could rescue the city. And I believe it's possible that Rem Koolhaas also had something similar in mind when he organized that large exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum in New York some years ago, exactly about the village and rurality, the rural. And now we arrive at a very important work in Copenhagen by Henning Larsen architects. He was alive at the time. I mean, he died in 2013. So 9 years since this building was built, the Opera House in Copenhagen. And here there are some echoes from Jean Nouvel, if I'm allowed to say so. But it is an opera house. Opera houses in general do have the ambition to represent some kind of a, you know, institution that is, you know, central to a city, that is, you know, the locus of special attention, is the culmination, the climax of an urban culture. It would be almost inconceivable to think of an opera house in a village. It is an urban institution. And, you know, simplifying dangerously, you could say an opera house has to be a building where you enter flanked on the left and the right by two lions, walking up some stairs. But for the competition for the opera in Oslo, in Norway, I myself did a proposal, but I didn't send it to, to be evaluated for various reasons. One being that the registration fee was insanely high. If I remember correctly, $700 just to submit your work. And then the way I did the work was at least controversial, but I could tell you in a few words what I did. I proposed the first underwater opera because it was to be placed on water, and because I thought it would be, from one point of view, less intrusive to the landscape, and also maybe even more economical to place the whole building under the water instead of, creating foundations in the water from the surface of the water. The competition was won by Snohetta, and it was built, and it's a well-known building by Snohetta. But I don't have here. I should have had actually pictures with because I did the work, in a sketchy way in pastels uh, for the first underwater opera. This building by Henning Larsen is not underwater, it's on water or near the water. And yes, for these countries, water is extremely important. These are countries that live, in a way, live by the water in all senses. And the Vikings, they loved the ships, the boats. It was a culture inspired by and facilitated by the presence of water. And this presence of water manifests itself in so many ways beneficially in the architecture of Denmark and in the architecture of Norway as well. So this is the opera house. It is indeed an opera house. Even if you didn't know what it is, you would probably say this must be the opera house of Copenhagen. And it is. A large container for many people who are cosmopolitan, who have the money to go to the opera. Usually opera shows are expensive, they cost a little bit of money, and you might be helped if you had a tuxedo in your wardrobe. Anyway, it's a world, it's not the world of proletarians, although I understood that some non-conventional members of present day societies do go to the opera also with broken jeans and whatever. Maybe, but not so much perhaps in Copenhagen. I don't know. The building is not bad, but it's, it's an opulent, large building for a well-to-do, very well-to-do major city in the world. Although Copenhagen is not such a big city, its population is about 660,000 people, without counting the population outside of the municipal part of the city, which includes, again, 1.5 million people. But all in all, together with us, the extensions of the city outside of the limits of the municipality is about 2 million people. So that's the building. You see there, it's centrally positioned. You can't escape it. This is a very important historical. We see the octagon again, the square, and then through it we see the opera house of Henning Larsen. As I said, there are echoes from certain buildings by Jean Nouvel. I don't know if there was a direct influence or not, but the similarity is striking. It's a very large canopy, very courageously cantilevered. I guess, it invites people underneath to you know, to enjoy art, operas, discussions, debates, and so on. Other strict functionalists would say it's useless to make such an extravagant canopy extending so much towards the water because it is expensive, but it's the welcoming gesture of a large institutional building in Copenhagen. It's a social veranda. It's the place that symbolizes the openness of the opera house towards the city, and also the welcoming of the city of such gesture of being embraced, being interested in having a dialogue with. Maybe those who think that architecture, its very essence, is about the public, maybe there is some truth here, although we cannot ignore, the private. So, but you must have at least you must have a certain nuance, a certain element that evokes the public dimension of architecture. If architecture excludes the public, somehow it almost negates itself, because even a private house which negates its dialogue with the context, with the sky, with the earth, with the elements, with the passers-by, is it truly architecture? We doubt it. Anyway, Henning Larsen. It is spectacular that decisive slab, that cantilevered large canopy. It's one might be tempted to interpret it as a separation between man and the gods, or man and the heavens, or man and the sky. But you must have a very intensified skepticism in order to interpret it in this way. But in its abstractness and in its resolution, this large canopy is the most striking architectural element of this building. Now, 2004, the IT University of Copenhagen, IT developed a lot from 20 years ago. A white architecture, but with some playful elements. The cantilever cubes that extend beyond the limits of the open spaces on both sides. The courtyard, also an important element in Scandinavian architecture. The House of Music, Uppsala, Sweden, 2007. It is maybe, but not maybe as Yanis Xenakis would have envisioned it. It's not very spectacular as a building, but it has a certain, let's call it, musical, character evoked by those elements on the facades. But it's not a very, striking building. The Roland Levinsky building, as part of the Plymouth University in England, yeah, we see, more courage in dislocating fragments of the building from what could have been a monolithical approach to the functions of the building. It is a mundane architecture. It is an architecture which doesn't risk a lot. But from time to time it does. This is in Hamburg, in Germany. Again, Henning Larsen Architects. Harpa, Concert Hall and Conference Center in Reykjavik, Iceland, 2008-2011. This is a building that received some awards, maybe even the Miss European Prize in Architecture, if I remember correctly. Here there is an interesting play with the facade because there are two systems, and this is being done by other architects as well. You see here the two systems and the tension between them. You know, you have the you know the constructive you know predictability based on structure uh, behind, and then in front some kind of a different system, some kind of an architectural veil that problematizes what is behind. And from the tension between the two, something interesting happens at night and sometimes even during the day. There is potential, I think, for a veiled architecture, an architecture with two facades. Henning Larsen in Iceland. Here again, plenty of people, and fragmentation does good when it is balancing or attempting to balance what could have been an excessive monolithical, you know, conceiving of the building, because the building, it is a large building, and this fragmentation erodes a little bit potentially oppressive attributes of a building of such a magnitude. That was it. But there are other buildings by his office that are worth exploring, and I will talk about them one of the next days. Let's have a talk if you want.